Hello, welcome back. Another live stream. Dungeons and Dragons. That's right. How to D&D. I talk about Dungeons and Dragons here. And this is all about the core rules for Dungeons and Dragons 5e. This is my ongoing series where I help those of you who are getting into the game and need a bit of assistance with the basic core rules. And that's what we're focusing on today. So my advice to you is grab some food, some drink, get comfortable. And by all means, have some questions ready to go. You will notice that the chat has been set up for subscribers only, and that is to stop the bots from taking over my live stream, which has happened more than a few times, and it's become too regular a feature. So I'm going to put up a poll. Hello, Fendar. Fendar is a patron. How's it going? I'm putting up my poll, and I would suggest posting any questions you have in there, and I will come back to them very, very shortly. I have a slideshow, then I'll come back and do some Q&A, and I will apologise right now. I will not be able to do a demonstration because my office is still not sorted out, but the good news is that this weekend, in a couple of days, I'm getting all of the stuff that's I've purchased, all this expensive gear, the final stuff, the camera, the lights are all getting installed. And we should be ready to go then. But yes, we'll do a Q&A today instead after the presentation, which would be the 4K slideshow. I've upgraded the slideshow to 4K for those of you who want to watch it on a TV. You can now, if you've got a 4K TV or a 4K, what phone, something like that, tablet. Anyway. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, because I always do talk about Dungeons and Dragons or role-play games, but it seems to be mostly Dungeons and Dragons. Today it's Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules, the core rules. This is Lesson Plan 1, the basic game mechanics. This is the absolute essential stuff you really need to know. It's the very fundamental root for the entire game, and that's where we're starting for today. So what is our overview? I'm going to cover creature ability scores, how to make an ability check, what the skills are in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make a skill check. I'm going to talk about what saving throws are and how to make a saving throw. I'll talk about attack rolls, how to make an attack roll. I'm going to talk about the DC or difficulty class. What does that look like? Contests, which is a dice mechanic as well. And then AC or armor class and that dice mechanic as well. And then finally, cream of the crop, I will talk about advantage, disadvantage. And even though it's not obvious from my slide here, I'm going to be talking about some miscellaneous recommendations that I have for you with regard to adjudicating the rules should you find yourself in that position. For today, my objectives, I will explain everything and show you to a certain degree with slides. I can't do demonstration today, but I can answer your questions today. And in terms of participation, I haven't been able to sort that out, but we can do some Q&A. So we're still good. The rest will come very, very soon. Okay, D&D Beyond has the basic core rules for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It is available free. You can go and download it or access it, and it costs you nothing. Okay, and I would recommend getting the stuff for the players and the Dungeon Master so that you don't have to go and buy anything to start off with, just so you get into the game, and it just makes it easier as an entry point. Right, creature ability scores. What the heck are they? Like, blimey, is there something that we need to know about this? Well, the core fundamentals of Dungeons & Dragons, or even Dungeons & Dragons 5e, you'll find is wrapped up in 6 ability scores. These 6 abilities provide like a quick description of every creature's physical and mental characteristics. And the whole game mechanics is based on the ability scores when you try to do anything. Everything about Dungeons & Dragons is about taking an action or trying to do something. And they are all based on this. So the first one is strength. This measures your physical power. This would be I'm going to use the tomato analogy, which I've used before in the past. I think it has worked pretty well for most people, so I'm going to continue along that way. Okay. This is your character's ability to crush a tomato in their hand. That's strength. The next one is dexterity. This is your agility. It measures how agile your character is. This is your character's ability to avoid being hit by a tomato when it's thrown at you. Constitution, this measures your endurance, and that would be a character's ability to eat a rotten tomato without getting sick or vomiting everywhere. Intelligence is measuring your reasoning and memory, and that is your character's ability to know that a tomato is in fact a fruit and not a vegetable. Wisdom measures your perception and your insight. In fact, often intelligence and wisdom get mixed up because they aren't actually the same thing. So if you're talking about a character being smart, it's probably because they're wise rather than intelligent. This is your character's ability to understand that a tomato doesn't go into the fruit salad. It should be going into the vegetable salad, the side salad, okay, not the fruit salad, even though it is a fruit. And then charisma measures your force of personality. This is a character's ability to sell that rotten tomato or rotten tomatoes to a customer and then for them to still be pleased with the outcome. Okay, so I've given you the basics. So what are the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e dice mechanics that we need to look at? Well, I've kind of gone over them very briefly, but let's go into them in far more detail now and give you sort of the basics around this. How do we go about making an ability check? Often, probably, I guess, this is where we really need to start, is actually how we go about making an ability check. So an ability check allows an action to be taken that has a chance of failure. You never make an ability check if there's no chance of failure in the game. And you can find the information on ability checks on page 174 of the Player's Handbook. The ability check is a test of a character or a monster's effort to overcome a challenge or some sort of threat. That's usually what we're trying to do here. There are 6 different types of ability checks. That is the strength one, the dexterity, the intelligence, the constitution, the wisdom, and the charisma. There are these are sort of the most important mechanics in the game, and they fill in all the gaps. So if you ever get stuck, always come back to this. Ability checks are the result of adding your ability modifier to a 20-sided dice roll, and the end result is you get your ability check for whatever you need to determine, okay? And then we take that number and we're going to compare that with something else, but I'll talk about that very shortly. This is usually when you compare it to a DC or difficulty class, or we're using it in some sort of contest, like a skill contest of some kind, or an ability contest. They can be essentially the same thing. Okay, so that gives us the basics around the ability check. There are specialized things called skills. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the different skills with you and sort of explain them a little bit more in detail. Skill checks are specialized ability checks. So think about the 6 ability checks we have, and now you break those up into skills that are very specific to that ability check. They allow an action that also has a chance for failure. So if there's no chance of failure, then you don't do it. But it might include training. So when we use skills, quite often, if you're proficient, you would be using your proficiency bonus with that. So it's sort of an extension of the ability check. You'll find information on skill checks on page 174 of the Player's Handbook. The skill check is a test of a character or monster's specific aspect of that ability, okay, to overcome a challenge. This is what we're really wrapping our head around. There are 18 different skills. There is athletics, acrobatics, sleight of hand, stealth, arcana, history, investigation, nature, religion. That's right, animal handling. Of course, we've got animal handling. And it continues on like this. There's quite a few. Insight, medicine. And when we look at the different types of skills, move into my second list. Here we go. You'll notice that each of the skills that I've presented to you have an associated ability score that is linked to them, okay, or ability. That is how the easiest way to understand them is really, if you get that, you get everything, okay? So insight, medicine, perception, survival, deception, intimidation, performance, persuasion. Now, I could explain what each one does, but most of them are usually pretty self-explanatory. Athletics lets you do things that are very physical. Acrobatics lets you do things that are very acrobatic. Sleight of hand lets you do things that are deceptive and tricky. Stealth is like your ability to sneak around. Arcana is your sort of knowledge of magic. History is your knowledge of history. Investigation is your ability to be like Sherlock Holmes. Nature is your understanding of the wider world, flora, fauna, nature basically. Religion is your understanding of religion. Animal handling is how well you handle an animal without it biting your hand off. Insight is your ability to look at a situation and determine that either an animal, creature, or a humanoid is what they're up to, like what's going on for them. Medicine is exactly what it seems like. You're dealing with medicine, some sort of medicine check. You're dealing with healing, stuff like that. Perception is your sights. That's your seeing, hearing, smell, touch, that sort of thing. Survival is essentially what it sounds like, your ability to survive. Deception is tricking people. Intimidation is scaring the bejesus out of somebody. And then I guess your performance is like you're singing and you're dancing and like just performing. And then persuasion is just how well you can, you're not tricking somebody, you're just convincing them like this is a good idea. Okay, those are the different things that we're dealing with. And essentially it's all broken down the same way, all linked to at least one of the 6 ability scores. Okay. Let us have a look at how we do a skill check, and you'll notice a pattern starting to develop already as I've already gone through a few of these so far. Some skill modifiers will be calculated a little bit different, okay? In some cases, when you're working out what your skill modifier is, it'll be calculated by adding your ability modifier and adding your proficiency modifier, proficiency bonus if the character is trained or proficient in the skill. If it's not trained or proficient in the skill, you would just use the ability modifier as your skill modifier. Okay? Skill checks are the result of adding your skill modifier to a 20-sided dice roll, and voila, at the end you get your skill check result. Okay? And then we're going to compare that with a DC or difficulty class, or we're going to use it in a contest of skills. Right, so that's the basics around our skills. Next is creature saving throws. Ooh, what are these? Probably one of the hardest aspects of the game to understand is the saving throw. So if you feel this is difficult, I understand. I'll break it down nice and slow. Saving throw DCs or saving throw dice mechanics. This is when you're making a dice roll that is a saving throw, and it's because you're trying to resist a spell. You might be trying to deal with a trap. You're resisting the effect of a trap or a poison or a disease or a hazard or some sort of harmful force where there is a chance of failure and something bad could happen. You'll find information on saving throws on page 179 of the Player's Handbook for those of you who are interested. There are a few conditions around how saving throws work, and I will explain. A saving throw is usually automatic, okay? It's a forced attempt to resist a threat, where the character or monster doesn't really have a choice. It's not really an action as such. It is a reaction to something. You are resisting something. There are 6 saving throws related to the abilities, and that is, we have the strength saving throw, the dexterity saving throw, the intelligence saving throw, the constitution saving throw, the wisdom saving throw, and the charisma saving throw. You can now see why I talked about those 6 ability scores so much. They're fundamentally one of the most important aspects of the whole thing. So, to give you an idea of what those saving throws kind of look like, I've got some examples for you to make it a little bit easier to understand. And the first one I want to go over is the strength saving throw. This would be to stop being pushed by a strong wind. If you're in a windy storm, you would make a strength saving throw, otherwise you might get knocked over, prone, or blown into a tree. A dexterity saving throw would be used to avoid being hit by a rolling boulder trap. Like if you're in, say, Indiana Jones, not the Temple of Doom, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, boulder coming towards you, and you have to leap out of the way. It's using your agility, so you make a dexterity saving throw. Constitution saving throws. This is to resist the poison laced in the drink that somebody handed to you as they were trying to remove you from the scene. Okay, so we'd make a Constitution saving throw. An intelligence saving throw. This is to disbelieve an illusion created by magic in some cases. But yes, if you're dealing with an illusion, you're making a intelligence saving throw to disbelieve it. A wisdom saving throw would be to resist being charmed by a mermaid who is singing a very beautiful song, and then of course if you don't resist it, you wind up getting dragged down into the bottom of the sea and drowned. A charisma saving throw is to avoid being possessed, not poisoned. You get possessed by ghosts, right? So a charisma saving throw would be used to avoid being possessed by a ghost who would then take over your body and use you like a meat puppet. Okay, so now that we've got that, we need to look at how do we actually go about making that check? What does it look like in the game? Very simply, this is how it works. Some saving throw modifiers will be calculated using your ability modifier only. But, okay, you may be required to use your ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus if your character is trained in that particular saving throw, or they are proficient in that saving throw. Not all characters are proficient in every single saving throw, okay? So once we figure out what the number is for our saving throw, what that modifier is, then we can go and actually start finding out the ultimate result of our saving throw. That is, a saving throw is the result of adding your saving throw modifier for whichever ability that is it's related to, and then you're going to add that to a 20-sided dice roll. And the end result gives you a number. This is your ability saving throw, okay? This is the final result. And we will compare that with a difficulty class or DC. And that's as simple as that. Usually it's pretty simple. It doesn't get any easier than that. All right, let's move on to, I guess, one of the things you're probably going to come across more often than not, and that is creature attack rolls. Like, how does that work in the game? So there's quite a few. Attack rolls are used to hit a creature in combat, and when we are doing this, there's a specific way it works, but you'll find the information on page 193 to 195 of the player's handbook. It's quite a complicated section. Attack rolls represent a character or monster's attempt to hit successfully. So you've got to be successful in your hit with a significant amount of force to actually reduce hit points. Okay, so if you hit them and it's so light that nothing really happens, that would be an unsuccessful hit. So we're trying to hit them hard enough to reduce their hit points. It's not actually physical damage. You could use a ranged weapon, a close quarter weapon. You could use ranged spells or close quarter or melee spells. You could use an unarmed strike or punch or kick them. It could be involving claws or teeth or a natural body part like a tail. So there are lots of different ways you can make your attack roll. Right, now that we've worked that out, how do we actually determine what our attack roll will be? The simplest way, and you will have noticed there is a pattern that is continuing here. Some attack roll modifiers will be calculated by just using your ability modifier. This is very rare. In most cases, you won't be doing this. In the case of most of your characters, you'll be using something that you actually are proficient and trained in. So your attack roll modifier or attack bonus, okay, when you're making your attack, that is going to be determined by your ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus if your character is trained or proficient in the attack. And it's much smarter to make sure you make attacks with things you are proficient with rather than something you are not. Okay? Attack rolls are the result of adding your attack modifier or bonus to a 20-sided dice roll. And at the end, we take that number, that attack roll, that final attack roll, and we're going to compare it against an armor class or AC. If you get equal to or greater than, you're all good. All right, that is the basics around dealing with attack rolls. But we need to go into a little bit more detail about the actual specifics of different mechanics. And you've heard me talking about things like DC and difficulty class and AC and stuff like that. So let's break that down so it's much easier for you to understand. First off, you'll find that as a general rule, when it comes to making any kind of dice roll, an ability check or a skill check or a saving throw, you're usually taking that number and comparing it to a difficulty class or DC. Okay? And any ability check, any skill check or saving throw, it needs to be equal to or greater than the DC or difficulty class if it's going to be successful. If it's less than the DC, the number that you get, it's a failure. Okay? So the typical difficulty classes for any kind of DC is going to be 5 is very easy, which you'll almost never be rolling because it would be a waste of your time. 10 is easy, which you probably shouldn't be rolling, but some people do. 15, which is medium difficulty. 20 is hard. 25 would be a very hard task. And 30 is near impossible, and nothing should be higher than the 30, essentially, because the scale is supposed to be 5 to 30. Although I know Dungeon Masters do change that, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm not doing homebrew mechanics today. So that's the basics around a difficulty class. There's another one, by far the most complicated mechanic out of the entire lot that I'm going to present today, is the contest. Okay, this is much more difficult to understand. This is when you use an ability check or a skill check, and it's used to resolve some situations where a contest between two different ability or skill checks is going to be utilized. The only way this works is, and I suppose the best way I can explain this is, you have to be, if you're going to be successful at this task, okay, when you're using a contest, you must get greater than the other opposing ability check or skill check. You must get greater than. You can't get equal to or less than. That would be failure. Okay, success is only achieved by getting greater than the other person's or other creature's check. So the best example that I can present to you is, say, an arm wrestle between your character and a minotaur, and you both make a strength check or an athletics check, whichever one your dungeon master thinks is appropriate. An athletics check is just an expansion on the strength check. Okay? Right, so you make either a strength check or an ability check. Your character makes an ability check or strength check. Your minotaur makes the minotaur makes a strength check, and whoever gets the highest result is successful in winning the arm wrestling contest, and they drop the other. Okay? If you were to get equal to, if they were both the same, then there would be no change and they stay put. If you get less than, you are the one that loses. That's how the contest works in the game. And there are a few times this comes up, such as grappling and shoving, and it can come up with other situations, potentially. You might use this, as I said, this mechanic for an arm wrestle or holding a door closed. That might be appropriate as well. If there are monsters trying to bang on the door and get in, you might use a contest. Okay, so that's the hardest one to understand. The next one and the last one in the main mechanics for dealing with all these attack rolls, ability checks, saving throws, and skill checks, that is armor class. You're going to come across armor class a lot in the game. This is where you make an attack roll and you compare your attack roll result to the target or the creature's armor class or AC. Any attack roll needs to be equal to or greater than the target's armor class to hit. So to be successfully in hitting and doing something, you need to get equal to or greater than. If you get less than the armor class of the creature you're trying to hit, you miss. Okay? If you get less than, you miss. When an attack roll hits, roll the appropriate damage for your attack and apply any special effects if there are any modifiers that might apply. I'm not going to go through how to roll for damage. The reason being is there's so many different ways that works that would just confuse you, okay? Weapons work differently, spells work differently. Even within spells, there's a different formula for every single spell, so it's probably a waste of my time to try to deal with that. Now, to give you an example of how that might work at your table, imagine that you have a 5 for your attack roll modifier. So your attack modifier, okay, your bonus that you're going to roll, you're going to use is a 5. Level 1 character. and you roll a 20-sided dice, and when you roll your 20-sided dice, you get, say, a 12, you take your 5, you add your 12, you get 17. That is your final result for your attack roll. You're going to take that 17 and compare it against the armor class of your Minotaur. And let's say your Minotaur's only got an armor class of 14. You've got greater than 14, okay? It's equal to greater than 14. You hit the Minotaur and are able to punch him in the face and maybe knock out a tooth. Who knows? Something like that. That's essentially how the whole process works. We're not finished. Even though we've done attack rolls, there are two very important mechanics that have been introduced to Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and I want to talk about them. And that is, the first one is advantage. How does advantage work in your game? So what you do is anytime you get advantage, you would roll two 20-sided dice. You don't always get advantage, but if your Dungeon Master gives you advantage for whatever reason, or you have an ability that talks about you have advantage on this roll, you roll two of them, two 20-sided dice. You use the highest of the two rolls. Once you've rolled them, that is how you determine that you have advantage. You can use advantage on an ability check, a saving throw, and an attack roll. And an ability check could also include a skill check. So that is how advantage works. You're using two dice, take the highest result. Disadvantage is the opposite to what I just described. This is when you have disadvantage for whatever reason, whether it be a special ability, a spell, or your Dungeon Master applies disadvantage to whatever dice roll you have to make. Okay, and then you roll those two 20-sided dice and you use the lowest of the two rolls. That is when you have disadvantage on your ability check. You can use it to apply it to an ability check, a saving throw, an attack roll, or a skill check. But you don't always have disadvantage. You only use it when it applies to the roll, and the Dungeon Master will usually specify that. Now, advantage and disadvantage can apply to your player character, but it can also apply to an NPC or non-player character, other creatures, and monsters. So it's fundamental in knowing how it works, and if you don't know how it works, it can cause you a few hassles. But it's a simple mechanic. It's usually pretty easy to understand. My miscellaneous recommendations for those of you who are playing the game for the very first time or are very new and you're struggling with the game mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. If you are unsure what to do with any game mechanic whatsoever, then just have the character or the monster, if it's the monster being involved, have them roll a 20-sided dice. That's the first thing you want them to do. And then you're going to add that result from the dice to an ability modifier that seems related to the action the creature or character is trying to perform. That is usually the easiest way to adjudicate anything. If you come across anything in the game that doesn't seem to be covered by a rule or a situation, then just go with, I'll make an ability check, okay? And that's it. It's usually the easiest way to resolve anything that doesn't get covered by the rules. Now, for those of you who are here, I am hoping that this was useful to you and presented the information that you required. I would very much like to know your questions if you're having any trouble with the Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules, what things you struggle with. If there are any questions that you have, put them into the comments. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. We need to get back into the chat. Let me move over to my face. Let's see if I can find my face. There we go. And we go. There it is. Well, okay, right. So let's go into chat. And if it weren't obvious right now, I'm going to say just start asking your questions, and I will do my very best to answer those questions. So hashtag, where are we? Hashtag. Question. Okay. Ask me some questions. I'm happy to answer questions unrelated to the game mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Okay, if you have questions outside of that, that's fine. I don't mind at all, okay? Ask me some questions. There we go. All right. Pardon me. You might have noticed that my voice is starting to fall apart on me yet again, but I'm hoping that summer will come very quickly. Right, so let's have a look at this poll, and then we'll go through the chat. Do you have any questions about Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules? We've got 15% out of 13 people said yes, and 8% no, sometimes 38%. We'll see how we go. Just watching, 38%. I suspect there are a lot of people who are patrons in here today, and I can see them now. Okay, so if you haven't noticed, I've turned on the chat, so you need to be subscribed for at least 20 minutes to put anything into chat. This is to keep the bots out. This is not to gatekeep or anything like that. This is not to ensure that only patrons can ask questions or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with that, okay? It's just to keep, since YouTube does such a poor job of managing spam bots, this is what I've put in place, okay? I feel like it will be a better experience. So Fender, I've said hi to Fender already, who is a patron. Spirit Wolf, how's it going? How are you? Todd, you have a question. Thank you. Todd is also a patron. And I see we have Agile Monk in here as well, who is also a patron and one of my moderators. Okay, Todd. Okay. You always have to look it up. I think the easiest way pardon me. I think the easiest way to remember how to use concentration when concentration applies to a spell is it's always 10 or half the damage. 10 or half the damage. That's all I remember is like it's either a 10 or it's half the damage, whichever is highest. That's the easiest way without looking it up. I don't think I remember anything else. And concentration check, because it's a constitution check, I always remember it as concentration check, C for concentration, C for constitution. Because like, which check do I make, right? Because that's the next question that you'll probably have is like in your head, like, okay, what's the DC of this thing? Well, it's going to be 10 or half the damage, whichever is highest, and then concentration means constitution. That's the easiest way. I wish they would coin it. They didn't coin it a concentration check, and they would just say it was a constitution check. To be fair, Todd, I actually wish they just got rid of concentration checks and just stated there are some spells that you need to concentrate on, and you can only cast one concentration spell at a time. And they got rid of the concentration check completely. And it just lasted for the duration or until you dispelled it. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, not my decision to make. Yes, thank you, Agile Monk. You can keep an eye out for spam bots. We'll see if they get past the layer of protection I've put in today. Spammers, yes. Hi, how's it going, Shiner81? Hello, how are you? Now, looking down for questions. What do you got here, Fender? So you're like, how do I, is that what your question was? Is how do I remember that they need to make a concentration check? I thought your question was more around remembering how they work. I think that was more your question. Yeah, that's how I figure. That's how I remember how it works. It's not so much about remembering that they need to make a concentration check. It's more about like how does it work? And I totally it took me ages. I used to have to look it up every single time myself. I now got to the point where I don't have to worry about that anymore. Thank God. It only took how many years? 7 or 8 years. Okay. Hello, Pale Rider. How are you? Welcome to the party. You like the explanation? Intelligence will let you know it's raining, and wisdom will tell you to get out of the rain. Exactly. A lot of people do actually get quite confused because they assume that if you are intelligent, that you're actually quite clever and smart. But there are plenty of people who remember a lot of information, but it is thick as two coots. It's thick as shit. I was going to say that it's thick as shit. So the same thing applies in your Dungeons and Dragons game. You know what I mean? You can have somebody who has remembered and has got a fantastic memory, but Poor decision maker and does extremely poor, silly things that would potentially harm somebody else or themselves. Whereas if they have a high wisdom, it's different. I would prefer to have a high wisdom than a high intelligence. Although, in this day and age, I think maybe high intelligence usually pays you more money than high wisdom. Although there is certainly something to be said for those people who have a high wisdom, because management usually pays quite well. Although I think in technology society, it may. No, I feel like I feel like you really need to have wisdom for that. But anyway, okay, I'm going off tangent. Let's move on. Okay. So we've done. No, it's not always a 10 at all. It could be half your damage. We've done that. Spirit Wolf, hello, Spirit Wolf. How are you? As a DM, you make it harder. Yes, you can. Yeah, well, this is my way of seeing things and how I do things. It's like I don't really want them to make the low checks. It's kind of a waste of time. The only time it makes sense for them to be rolling against armor class and the armor class is really low is when you're dealing with zombies, because you want them to hit the zombie more often than not. Okay, but if you look at how ability checks and skill checks work, it makes sense that you eliminate the first two, the 5s and the 10s. Big Clue, hello, how are you doing, Big Clue? Welcome to the party. Yeah, yes, you could say half damage, minimum of 10, absolutely. Hello, Matt, how are you doing? So Matt, I've been told that some channels apparently get shadowed. So if YouTube doesn't think that that's going to pull in enough money, they will just kill it off by just making sure people who are subscribed do not get notified. And you can only get 3 notifications off YouTube in a given day. So if you've already been notified for 3 other things, then they won't notify you of this. Even if you click on the notification on the specific scheduled live stream, it still won't make it to you. I'm sorry. It's one of the reasons why I put all of the live streams now on the community tab, because you're more likely to know to see what's going on and when. Otherwise, you're likely to miss it. I can't do anything about that, unfortunately. How do you get advantage in 5e? Simple. You watch How to D&D. That's exactly right. So your question, I answered. I think I came up with 50 different ways to get advantage. And I think it was more around attack rolls. How to get advantage. Do I have the video here? Yes, how to gain advantage on attack rolls, which is usually the one that most people want, right? And I came up with a lot of different ideas. So what I'll do is I'll grab that link and I'll drop it in there. For those of you who, so Big Clue, thank you very much for highlighting that. I will put it in there. For those of you who are looking to figure out how to make that work, it's actually not that hard. There are a lot of ways to make it happen. Okay, Big Clue, question. What is your preferred snack of choice during D&D games? My preferred snack of choice. Snacky. It depends. If it's kind of around dinner time, I like pizza, but I can't eat pizza anymore. Pizza's messy though. Like, it's one of those things, like when you have pizza, it's just so messy. So that can be difficult. So if it's around mealtime, I'd like pizza. I kind of do miss pizza now. I was looking at somebody eating fish and chips from takeaways the other day, and I was like, missing that so much. So I guess if it's just a snack food, it's probably going to biscuits and chips, because they're the worst things for me to eat. But then lollies are too. But yeah, I guess my favourites are going to be the biscuits and chips. It's what I used to bring when I was able to eat junk food in the games. Does that answer your question, Big Clue? Uncrustables. The Uncrustables? Really? How's it going, Overboard Miniature Gaming? Hi, Joe. So Joe is a patron as well. How's it going, mate? Uh, Matt Faulkner, what do you got here? What do you got here, Matt? What is the best optional rule that adds more to 5e? What is the best optional rule? Okay. Do you mean one of my own optional rules or one that you can find? How's it going, Seeker? Hello. And hello, Major Lazor. I like your name. I'll get to your question, don't you worry. So let's answer that question. So, Matt, I think I'm 51. I have to eat a bit healthier than I have been, okay? I think optional rule for me out of my own homebrew stuff is there's two that I think are key for me personally, and that is letting my players retrain their characters whenever the hell they like, as long as it's not in game. They can make adjustments to their character before the game or after the game, but not during the game. And I don't care what they do as long as they don't change the name of the character and their equipment in gold. Anything else can be adjusted. And the reason I do this retraining thing in my game is so that when people make mistakes, they can fix them. And that's the only reason to do that. It's also to stop people from killing off their character and starting a new character because they see something cool that they want to try out. So I want to eliminate that. People do not play in my games and change out their characters all the time. The reason being is they don't have to worry about making a mistake with mechanics or a new mechanic coming along and wanting to try it out because they can. And my only provisor is let me know what you're doing and make sure you do it out of game time. So that's my first thing, is the retraining. I've noticed that Dungeons & Dragons design team are trying to build in mechanics into the game that allow players to make changes to their character, probably because dungeon masters are like set and said, no, you can't change it. That's what your character is now. You chose that. You now need to stick with it. For me, it's not. I just don't worry about that sort of thing. Ultimately, I know they're playing the character. Not at the mechanical level, but playing the character as the character. And the characters usually don't change. Their name, the equipment, and then how they play their character usually stays the same. But all of the mechanical bits and pieces, those things might change. And I'm fine with that. I can live with that. The other one, which has significantly changed my life, and I didn't used to do this, and that is when a character dies, I never make the decision myself about what happens to the character, no matter what their level. I always say to my player, so what do you want to do? Do you want to make up a new character, or do you want to play the same character that just died? And they will tell me, more often than not, I find that they say, no, I'll make a new character. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes they'll say, no, I really like this character. I put a lot of time into it. I want to keep playing it. And I'll say, okay, fine. Are you able to do that yourself with the resources from your party? And if they say no, and they can't, then fine, they need to come to me and we negotiate. I usually offer 3 ways they can do this, and I have a huge list of ways that you can bring a character back into the game when it dies. I know some people view this as taking away the threat of the game, but I can assure you that I can make my games particularly threatening and stressful and challenging and create stress and stakes and consequences without worrying about killing off a character permanently. I have, over the years, I have developed a good set of skills for torturing my players without having their characters die. And I say this in jest, okay, people? I do say this in a lot of jest. But there are ways of challenging players and putting in stakes that don't just rely heavily on whether you have character death. I do believe that character death should exist in the game, but I don't necessarily think that it needs to be permanent. Because any character person who comes to me with a character who's died, who needs my input, it means I can then mess with their character a little bit. And I often will put in a consequence as part of them coming back to life. Maybe they have to do a favor for a god. Maybe they wind up as a giant pile of poo, and they need to get, they'll have to find a way of reforming their body or put themselves into a different body. My group, my home group, love using the reincarnate spell. Like we have an extended list of different things you could become. I've had them go to see an NPC and ask for a favor to raise somebody from the dead or reincarnate. Often, most of the time, when I offer raise dead, my players insist that there be reincarnation involved, and then the chant for roll the dice comes up, and they're hoping that something bizarre will come up. That's just my home group's preferred method of doing things. And I usually have a way of working past the consequence. So even if I'm the one as the dungeon master bringing the character back into the game, I find a way for them to get rid of the thing that might have any kind of negative consequence whatsoever. And there usually is some sort of complication. Okay. Hello, Pat Sherwood. Pat is actually a patron as well. Welcome to the party, baby. Welcome to the party. All right, so Major Laser had a question here. Do attack of opportunity still exist in D&D 5e? If so, how do they work for a PC? Okay, the phrasing is different. So if you played something like Dungeons & Dragons 4e or Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, or you played an older version of the game, because attacks of opportunity did exist in older versions of the game. They just looked very different. Okay, let me go to that section so I get get it all right. There's a reason why I didn't talk about opportunity attacks in this video, for obvious reasons, and that is because it can be confusing. Now you'll find opportunity attacks on page, here we go, page 195 of the Player's Handbook. The first thing you need to understand with an opportunity attack is it's not an attack of opportunity, it's now an opportunity attack, which frankly, in terms of semantics and wording, who gives a shit? It's the same thing, okay? How it works has changed, that's all it is, okay? It still exists, but this is how it works. If you leave the threatened space, the melee threatened space of a creature, then they can have an opportunity attack on you, okay, using their reaction. So that might take place on your turn when you move away. You have to move deliberately away from the creature. If you're forced to move away from a creature, there's no attack of opportunity. To be able to perform an attack of opportunity, you must be able to see the creature, okay, the target. So if they are invisible, even if you know where they are, you can't do it. If you are blind, you can't do it. If you are in darkness and you don't have dark vision, you can't do it. That's one of the provisos, is you must be able to see the target. Now, what else is there that I need to say in terms of this? You can use the disengage action, and when you use the disengage action and you move away from a creature, it doesn't provoke an opportunity attack. So you don't wind up getting attacked, okay? You can also use the dodge action, which is probably smarter, but they would have disadvantage on their opportunity attack. The opportunity attack they get to use is always a basic attack. And you'll notice there's some stipulations as to the type of attack it can be. So where is it? I believe it said something about, and this is the thing that used to, is probably going to get sealed up later on anyway. Can I find it? Another point too, teleportation. You can teleport out of range, and there's no attack of opportunity. To teleport is another escape route for getting out of there. You make an opportunity reach. Yes, you must be in reach. Reaction. It has to be one. You only get one melee attack, okay, against anything that provokes. So if they move out of range, you get one attack. That's it. And it's got to be a melee attack. So that does mean that if you don't have a weapon, you could punch them. Okay. You could punch them if you wanted to. So if you don't have a sword or a weapon in your hand, you could just punch them. Okay. I think that answered your question. You'll let me know if it didn't, Major. Okay, next question. Victor. Hello, Victor. How are you doing? Okay, so you go, oh, Alfred, you're streaming every night now. Is it not obvious? I keep saying everybody thinks this is like some sort of special thing that I just did for like a week or two. No, this is the norm. This is why things have been so stressful. It's a reason why a lot of the stuff that should be going on to Patreon is taking a long time to get there, because I've been doing this like a lot. This is the norm. I do 6 live streams a week, and I publish, if I can, 5 videos. I need to get on to trying to release a story so you can see what's going on in the background of my channel, and I need to do a short, because if I don't do shorts, YouTube will kill the channel. So then I've got to figure out what sort of shorts to do. So that's a lot of stuff. It's been difficult recently, but yeah, this is the norm. You're not seeing the notifications. You won't get notified. I can tell you that now. Major Laser, that was cool. I'm glad I was able to answer the question the way look, if I was able to demonstrate it, I would demonstrate it as well. But that'll have to wait for a week or two. Okay? When the lights are in place, then I can take everything off my desk. Okay, so let's have a look here. Yeah, healthier eating. Yeah, I can't solve the problem of notifications. All right, so Victor. How do I adjudicate when a PC or player character attacks another player character? Okay, I was in a campaign and a player picked a cursed item. Picked a cursed item up, applied greater restoration, and another player immediately began fighting the other player. Okay, so Victor, I think your question has a couple of parts. So let's deal with a couple of parts of this, okay? First off, you're talking about PvP, between player character and player character. I have a rule at my table, and that is that the only thing that's important at the table with regard to decision making is that the benefit and welfare of the players, not the characters, override everything else. So things like playing your character are not as important as the integrity and making sure that the players and the people at the table or in the group are happy and functioning well. That is always more important than everything else. It means that the story and the adventure is less important as well. That is the least important aspect of it. The most important thing is the integrity of the group and people getting along. So this is how we do it. Anytime another player has their character do something that would disadvantage another player character in some way by inflicting damage, like if they wind up fireballing them, or they get caught in an effect, or whatever. Anytime they deliberately with their character, that player deliberately with their character does something that would negatively impact another player character, they must ask for permission first before it ever gets done. It involves a bit of metagaming, but that's what we do at my table. It works really well. Okay? Now, any time that a spell or a monster has an effect that does something with a player character, like dominate them, and then suddenly you find another player character impacting another player character because they are dominated by, say, a cursed magic item or a monster's effect because they've dominated their mind, or the dungeon master has got, as me, the dungeon master, I've got something in play that is affecting their ability to control their player character and the decisions that they make. That's different. That can happen, okay? Because that's on the mechanics of the magic item, or the mechanics of the spell being cast by the monsters or NPCs. That's on the dungeon master. Do you know what I mean? So that's the only time where there isn't permission being asked. So when you get a cursed magic item, you will absolutely potentially have this problem crop up. The best way to deal with it is to explain, I've found, to the other player that they're dealing, this is a bit of metagaming, I know, just explain that the person is having to do this thing with the cursed magic item because they are cursed, okay? And now you then say, I'm telling you in person that this character is cursed and they don't actually have control of what they do. but I want you to play your character as if you don't realize they are cursed at this time, unless it makes sense in story. Now, some players can do that and some players can't. Okay? Does that answer your question, Victor? Because you'll let me know if it didn't or did. Okay? And I will do my best otherwise to keep going with that. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. So Victor will let me know if I answered the question the way he wanted. I think that's what you were getting at, right? But yes, I don't let players go fisticuffs for real in a group, and I don't expect myself to be the only one who stops that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? A lot of my players, so my home group consists of people who are older than me and younger than me. I'm 51. JP's older than me. Simon's a bit younger than me, I believe. Cajun's younger. Christy's younger. John's younger. So, but we are all adults in this group, so we should be able to actually communicate in a mature manner and resolve our issues. Now, sometimes we are childish because that does happen even with adults, but that's how we deal with things. Okay, cool. Okay, so I did give you a solution to how to resolve your current issue. Good, cool, awesome. Glad to hear it, Victor. And you're welcome. All right, so next, moving along. That was Victor. Matt, what do you got here? What has Matt got here? Matt has said, what's a good way to create suspense for players in my game? Okay, I've kind of talked about how to create suspense in the past. This is how I would go about it. The worst thing that you can have in a game is have characters that can see in the dark. Dungeons and Dragons 5e is full of them. It's a real problem. So one of my slight fixes to deal with that problem is all of my monsters have 120 feet of dark vision to contend with the fact that the vast majority of player characters in Dungeons and Dragons have 60 feet of dark vision. Now, why is that? One, because I need them to not see the monsters. One of the most important aspects of building suspense is if you have a monster involved, Matt, this is not everything, but if you have a monster involved, just like the original Jaws movie by Spielberg, is you never want to show them the monster. You want them to hear the monster. You want to see the effect of what the monster did, and that is to build up trepidation. As soon as you show the monster and they fight the monster, that is when all of that fear and tension disappears. So the suspense is gone, okay? One of the easiest ways to also build up suspense and tension in a game, and I'm assuming you may be running something like the Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft or a horror-themed campaign, is to speak clearly but slowly. Do not rush, okay? Anything that you do, you give only the most pertinent information. So if you have a long set of dialogue, you break it up or you remove some of the most unimportant stuff. You only give them the broad strokes, forcing them to ask questions. Because you know you've got your players when they start asking you questions. Because if they're asking you questions, they're not looking at their phone, they're not looking at their tablet, they're not looking at their laptop, they're not away with the fairies. You know that they're actually with you and you are connected in some way, okay? And they can't do that if all they do is sit there. So if you can force them to to ask questions, I've said this before, but speaking very, very slowly, okay? The wind is blowing. Slowly, you can see the window shutter moving back and forth. So you need to slow everything down. That's the easiest way to deal with suspension and suspense, is just to slow down your rhythm, which sometimes can be quite difficult. I apologise, I am still struggling with the mucus. Okay, all right. We're almost up to it's an hour. I'm going to take a quick break, but before I do, I'm going to put in hashtag. I want you to ask me some hard questions. We'll see how well. I didn't do that well last time. I think I got quite a few hard questions, and I had no answers for those. So here we go. Hashtag. Ask me some hard questions. Related to Dungeons and Dragons or roleplay games, okay? don't ask me like how do we solve the energy crisis or global warming or something like that. You're welcome. You're welcome, Matt. I'm if that was what you were after. I do have a video that talks about how to create, use dark humor and build up suspense. Okay, right. So as you are coming up with some hard questions, I'm going to get Arnold to look after you for about 5 minutes, probably less, and I'll be back. Clambering back in here. I hope you have been working hard on those questions, people, because I'm making myself comfortable again and getting back into the spot. And we'll deal with what we've got in terms of these hard questions. Make me fail at answering some questions, people. Like you can do it. You can. And if you can't, just ask me some questions. That's fine too. Oh dear. Anyway, I am now back, and we'll have a look at what we have here. Okay, so Matt, you're actually playing in Lost Mine of Fandelver, but it's heavily modified. Okay, all right. So Matt, I've seen you here before. You were part of the. Were you part of? Did you jump in? I'm pretty sure. Didn't you jump in this week's Lost Mine of Fandelver DM tutorial? I'm pretty sure I remember seeing you there. Or is it my imagination? Maybe it was some of the other one. Anyway, Yes. So yes. So I suppose I should make it clear for those of you who are still here. The core Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules. So we have 4 of these things. So I do basic game mechanics this week. Next week we'll be covering the basics of combat mechanics, then complex combat mechanics, the harder stuff, and then, pardon me, magic, which I'm hoping by the time we roll around to magic we'll be doing a lot better than was before. Thank you for the super chat, Agile Monk. I really do appreciate it. So this happens every week. So this is to help those of you who are struggling with rules get your answers. And one of the good things too is when I make a mistake, somebody in here will correct me if I did make a mistake. And it has happened, actually. It's hard to know everything. Okay, so what have you got here, Agile Monk? Let folks know how they can increase their spell DC to improve their spell casting, or maybe another episode. Okay, so how would you increase your spell DC? So, well, there's there's a couple of different ways you can do it that are pretty obvious. And if you are trying to figure out how to make your spell DC higher, probably the most obvious thing that you want to try and look for is increasing your ability modifier for that spell. Okay, spell casting. So whatever your primary spell casting ability is, getting that score higher. Okay, you can only get it when it reaches a maximum of 20, then you're capped out. But you can push it higher in some cases where you're using magic items. Magic items would allow you to go above 20 if you wanted to. Yeah, and then the only other way is to actually have a higher level character. The higher your character is, then the higher your bonus is, because the spell casting DC for your character, which is let's find the page for it so we can actually refer to it a bit more. The calculation, I'm pretty sure, is not that far away from where I was. Slots, spell casting material, blah 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 blahs, range. Where's the calculation? That's concentration. I don't want concentration. I want the actual mechanics for spell casting and making that the DC. Here we go. Saving throw DCs for your spell casting. You'll find that on page 205 of the Player's Handbook, and it says the following. Again, Agile Monk, thank you for the super chat, the $10 super chat. It says here your DC is going to be equal to 8, so you can't change that, plus your spell casting ability modifier, so increasing it every time you can is always a good thing, rather than taking a feat. And then your proficiency bonus, which you only actually increases with your level. Now, it also says plus any special modifiers. There are a few different ways to increase that modifier. And off the top of my head, I don't actually remember all of them or even that many of them, but there are ways of doing it. I believe, now who was it? Somebody recently did a video on that, and I wonder who it was. Trent Monk. Didn't Trent Monk? I'm pretty sure he was explaining how to push your DC up really high or something like that. I don't know which end it was, whether it was to resist or to do what Agile Monk's talking about, which is effectively increasing your spell DC, so it's harder for creatures to resist it. Anyway, right, let's go back to questions here. Joe, you have a question. I have you have been seeing a lot of videos popping up on 1D&D. Okay, all right, here we go. My question is there any new material released other than what we already seen? So you have the character origins, the first play packet, and then there's now a second play packet called Unearthed Arcana Expert Classes, which talks about some of the changes they're making to the rogue, the bard, and the ranger. And then there's a whole lot of feats, a whole lot of changes to spells, and to the core rules of the game. I'm going to be talking about the Rogue, the Ranger, and the Bard tomorrow from that play packet. So for those of you who are unaware, that's what there is. Can I find you a link to that? Let me just see if I can find you a link to it now. And you can just go and, will that work? Just go to D&D Beyond, and you just go in there and you should be able to find it. It's not that difficult. So there are 2 play packets out now. Okay? And there should be a poll or a survey for the second play packet coming up in about a week's time. Hopefully that answered your question, Joe. Okay? Matt, where can I find how to price items in stores in the manual? There are none, Matt. So if you're trying to price magic items, there's nothing really. There really isn't anything. There's a little bit of guidance in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, but you won't find anything significant in the where is it? The Dungeon Master Guide. In fact, you'll be quite disappointed. Thank you, Major Laser, for the $10 super sticker. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm going to see if I can I find you? I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it that quickly in the Dungeon Master Guide. What did I do with it at some point? Now that was for crafting. I've never really done a anything around how to price up and magic items. The problem is within the realm of common rarity magic items, the price is quite wide. It ranges quite a lot. So it's very hard to price that up. A book that does actually have prices for magic items is actually the Game Master's Guide of Random Encounters that Jeff put out. He put prices on all his magic items. I think that's probably where they need to go. Even if you can't actually buy magic items in your world that you're running as a dungeon master, or the dungeon master in your world doesn't have prices on things, for those of you who need that sort of thing and want that sort of thing, it would be helpful. How more difficult would that be? Probably not that difficult. But yeah, I think it's Xanathar's Guide to Everything that has a little section on that sort of thing somewhere. Can't remember exactly where. Pricing. I don't know if I can find it that quickly either. Even if I look on D&D Beyond, would I be able to find it that quickly on Xanathar's stuff? Sources, Xanathar. No, come here, you silly thing, you. There's Xanathar's there. And that's the Warlock, Sleeping, Adamantium, Spellcasting, Building, Random Pricing, Downtime Activities, Buying a Magic Item. There it is. Downtime Activities, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and there is a little bit of information there. I don't know which page it is, but I know it's under Downtime Activities and Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Okay. I mean, ultimately, I don't know that the guidance around that is going to be hugely useful, but if that's what you were after, that's where you'll find it. It's definitely under Downtime Activities, and it says buying a magic item. Okay, not crafting an item, but buying a magic item. All right. Okay. Next. How's it going, Han Solo? You mentioned previously that seeing in the darkness obscures vision, correct? Yes, it does. Where in the handbook is that covered? How does that affect combat if everyone has dark vision? Thank you. In combat, frankly, it doesn't do very much. It doesn't usually mean disadvantage. It means disadvantage on a perception check in darkness for anybody who has dark vision. If you don't have dark vision, you don't get to make a perception check. Well, I suppose you could make one with disadvantage, but you'd only be able to hear them. You'd never be able to actually see them. You know what I mean? I guess the other thing is with regard to the handbook. The player's handbook is awful when trying to find the stuff. And a lot of people have argued the point about how this works. So usually the dungeon master needs to decide if they're going to apply disadvantage. Usually I don't. If you've got dark vision and you're in darkness, you don't have disadvantage if you're making attacks, but you do with the perception check. Do you know what I mean? So you can see things, but you can't see it clearly. And you're dealing with you're dealing with total cover, potentially, heavy obscurity and light obscurity, and that would be in the adventuring section of the book. So let me just see if I can find the page area for you to look up. It is not going to be as clear cut as you would like. I can assure you right now. It will require you to do some... here we go. Vision and light. It's on page 183 of the Player's Handbook. Vision and light, and underneath there it says light obscurity. Now, light obscurity is, in this case, dim light. So if you have dark vision and you are in darkness, that you treat that darkness as dim light, okay? Which means everything is lightly obscured. That means you have disadvantage on wisdom and perception checks that rely on sight, okay? So that aspect is right there. Yep. It says nothing about attack rolls or anything like that. It just says perception checks and wisdom checks, okay? Relying on sight. Then heavy obscurity is a little bit different, okay? Because that blocks vision entirely. So if you have heavy obscurity, the only way to notice something is by hearing or smelling them, okay, rather than seeing them. So you're essentially got the blind condition if you're dealing with heavy obscurity. Heavy obscurity is darkness. So if you don't have dark vision and you're in darkness, you can't see diddly squat. Opaque fog, dense foliage, that blocks vision entirely, okay? You're essentially blind, which means you're kind of stuffed. And your light increments, or for light, go bright light, dim light, darkness. That's your grading. There's only 3, okay? So that's the easier way to understand that. And then what else we got here? Some examples of dim light are here. Some examples of what darkness would be like are here, but it should be pretty obvious, okay? It talks to you about what blind sight is like, okay? But there's also the blind condition in the back that you would also have to refer to. I don't know that it necessarily answers all your questions, but yeah, there we go. That's what we've got so far. And should I price high or low? That's up to you, Matt. When you're pricing, when you decide to price your magic items, it's up to you how you price them. You price them the way you want to price them, okay? If you don't want a lot of magic items, you price them high. If you want a lot of magic items, then you price them low. That's if you're going to have magic shops or places where you can buy stuff. Character creation for the Changeling Barbarian. All right, yep. Oh, you inspire... Oh, the big bad for your Fandelver. Twists and stories. Oh, good. Okay, now I know. I thought I'd seen you around a few times. What's your honest opinion? This is Major Laser. What's your honest opinion on players wanting to divide the party during a play session from a GM perspective? It depends when they're doing it. I've always been taught and trained that if you're in a dangerous location, you don't split the party, okay? Because quite often, dungeon masters, if they're building their encounters, may build them specifically to tax an entire party, not an individual. But then again, a lot of player parties are so powerful and much more powerful than the monsters quite often, unless you're doing a lot of work, yeah? So that's I guess one part of that is like, but if they're in town, then splitting the party shouldn't be an issue, because they're probably not going to encounter a battle, but they can divide their resource and their attention to a couple of different tasks to get things done faster in game. It's not going to get it done faster in real time, but it gets it done faster in game time, right? And that's the only time that sort of makes sense. I always think that as a dungeon master, I always recommend that players don't split the party when I know it's going to be a problem, until they become experienced players. rather than beginner players. And experienced players, I'm going to let them make mistakes because they should know this stuff by now. Okay, because I've already assisted them in that way. I kind of like it when they split the party because more crazy stuff can happen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the group ultimately. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question sufficiently, Mage Laser? Victor, let's have a look at your question here. Okay, so would you let a PC or player character ride a draconic spirit with the saddle of the cavalier? I would probably require a special saddle. There is talk of special saddles in the player's handbook, not just your standard saddles for horses and other animals. So, I mean, anything outside of a horse is probably going to be a special saddle. A special saddle for a dog, an elephant, whatever it is that you're riding, a camel, right? That's not your standard saddle, okay? So I think a draconic spirit would definitely be requiring that. As for would I let somebody ride a draconic spirit? Yeah, probably would. I've let my group ride dragons, so I would let them do that. It depends on the campaign and what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I've had fights where my players have been on dragons flying around fighting other enemies on flying dragons as well. It's crazy stuff, but I mean, you do everything at least once. Or would that break the game, character? Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, look. Does riding a dragon break the game? Or would riding around on a draconic spirit break the game? Potentially, yes. Okay. But so does Fireball and so does Wish. Like, if you want to break the game, yeah, having Fireball in the game and Wish will do that. Spellcasters can do that. Does the Paladin Smite and the current critical hit rules kind of break the game for when a Paladin smites and gets a critical hit, or the Rogue gets a critical hit with their sneak attack? Yeah. But there's a lot of things that do that. It's about whether you're all right with it being in the game and you can deal with it. If you feel like you're not going to be able to deal with that, Victor, then don't do it. If you feel like you don't know and you want to find out, then give it a go. And, draconic spirits are trying to keep a dragon under control is pretty difficult. Make it really clear to your player that actually keeping a draconic spirit around for a long period of time is probably going to be impossible. It's not like my players rode around on dragons indefinitely, okay? They did ride around on giant eagles, but they were terrified that the giant eagles would die and that I would just hurl a fireball into the air one day with some mages and blow them all to pieces. So they always landed at least a couple of miles from anywhere that had any danger when I had my players at high level. So even at high level, they would make no way are we risking the giant eagles, because giant eagles save everybody from everything. And you can approach the same thing with the draconic spirit. Draconic spirits might just decide to go somewhere else. Right, so there's a lot of feedback here. Let's go down here. That was a good question, by the way. I like it. Pretty good question, I have to say. What's Agile Monk saying here? As a DM, GM, splitting the party is usually a big mistake, except under certain circumstances. And I've kind of stated what those circumstances are here. On the new edition, I'm just curious. No, that's fine. So it's pretty clear to me that you know how I feel about talking about Unearthed Arcana, Joe. But it's clear to me that as we are building up to 2024 and the new game, I kind of need to discuss this stuff and get people sort of talking about it and thinking about it, but ultimately going to the surveys and giving feedback. Do you know what I mean? A lot of you will be using these kinds of rules already. Like, some of you will have probably made these changes already. Some of you have probably never seen these ideas and like you never done it. I can assure you right now, the concept of epic boons being used at higher level, like level 20 upward, is not new. It's part of the older version of the game. It became an optional thing that you could use if you were playing high-level games above 20 in the Dungeon Master Guide, and they're just trying to port that into the higher end of the game as the standard. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends what they do with the epic boons, like that. But that's not a new thing. That's actually just them taking. I've been looking at a lot of the older rules from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, particularly, and looking at what they're doing now. And actually, a lot of what they're doing is very, very similar, but there's a lot more of this going on. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot more of that sort of dice rolling thing going on. And some of the stuff is probably not as elegant as it could be. Whereas I think the loss of Mike Mearls, even though he got himself into a lot of trouble, has actually probably caused some... A lot of people don't realise that Monty Cook was also part of the development of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Monty Cook started the process of building the concepts around the game mechanics for D&D 5e before Mike Mearls came on board. And then Mike Mearls was really the driving force and the leader for Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins. Now, Mike is gone, and we've got Ray now, and Jeremy and Chris doing their thing. And at the game, you can see the philosophy is very different. But there are some things they're doing that actually go way back, like rolling a 20 on a 20-sided dice was always a success, whether it was an attack roll, saving throw, and then it changed when we got to 5e. So that's actually, yeah, that's just a 3.5 roll, if I remember right. I'm pretty sure it's 3.5, or is it 4e as well? But they changed that when we went to 5e. So, and there's a lot of that stuff going on. So yeah, I will talk about that stuff, don't you worry. D&D topics, magic item. Okay, so Monk has dropped in a link, and hopefully you can go and find what you're looking for there. So one of the things you'll discover is that Agile Monk has access and knows an awful lot of stuff. Okay. he can solve a lot of problems. Okay, here's a quick place online. Yep, provide some guidance. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Monk. There are ads on this. There's ads everywhere. Okay. All right. So we are almost at the bottom of the chat here. Let's see the next person. Matt, what have you got here? I gave my paladin a custom ring just in case a character dies. Okay. It can give health, but it subtracts health from the character. It can cast resurrection, but it permanently removes 1 from constitution. Okay. So you've built in a permanent mechanical consequence. I've done that myself. I find that my players don't really like that, but if your players are on board with that and you're on board with that and that's how you prefer to do it, then do it that way. Do you know what I mean? I guess most of the time, I had somebody who wanted to lose an arm. They brought their character back and they wanted to lose an arm. And I don't know what it was. They insisted on having a mechanical disadvantage. And I said, you really want a mechanical... Can't we just give you a prosthetic limb? Like, you can lose the arm and we just give you a new arm. Because, I'm sure they can have that sort of thing even in a fantasy world. And he's like, no. But yeah, you do what will work for you and your players. I mean, ultimately, in the end. Now, it looks like I've got to the bottom of the chat, which might mean that I can actually disappear, which would be very nice. I'd appreciate that quite nicely. Seeker, did you buy the new starter set? You did. You bought the new starter set, didn't you? I can see it here. All right. While I'm here, since I've got about half an hour, I probably should leave before that, but okay, people. If you don't have questions right now, what I will do is I'll grab my phone and I'm going to just sort of leaf on through the new It's on D&D Beyond, the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. Let's have a quick nosy through, maybe. Oh, hi Jeff, how's it going? How are you doing? When playing a pre-made campaign, seems like it's is real lack of magic items. Okay, when playing a pre-made campaign, seems like is a real lack of magic items. No, it's a different philosophy, Jeff. The idea behind D&D 5e is trying to harken back to older versions of the game where finding a magic item was really hard. You didn't really have magic shops. It was a big deal when you found something. It's not really something that the modern player understands because of video games, because they're used to magic items raining from the sky and being able to pull magic items out of the arse of a monster. So it's a very different way of thinking about things, you know what I mean? So I decided to spice things up by making sure each character had at least one rare magic item by level 5. Thoughts on this? If it works for your campaign, go for it, Jeff. I've done high magic campaigns for 5e, and I think we got to about level 10 and I had to trash it. It just got out of hand. The problem is that your players don't really need magic items in Dungeons and Dragons 5e because they've got so many things they can do. They've got so many little powers and abilities like that, and so many spells that they can get access. They get so many spells that they really don't need magic items. Even the martial classes that don't have a lot of magical stuff or magical abilities, they generally don't need them either. The only time that a martial class might need it is if they can't hold the front line and the people behind them aren't doing enough damage to kill whatever has damage immunity that they can't get through, because it's got damage immunity to piercing and slicing, slashing and bludgeoning or something like that, right? And they can't get through the damage resistance of the monster. And if the people at the back aren't doing enough damage fast enough, they can't hold the line. That's when you want your front line to be able to at least have a +1 sword or a +1 magic weapon. But you don't usually run into that sort of stuff until higher level, like mid-range, about level 10 and 8, 9, 10. Something like it certainly would crop up if you're dealing with a flesh golem, because flesh golems are pretty rough, and so is the iron golems pretty rough as well. Yeah. But yeah, my thoughts are, Jeff, it doesn't really matter what I think. You do what it is that you want to do. If it winds up being a mistake for you, I'm not going to detract you from learning that way, because I feel that people need to make their own mistakes. I've already done it myself. It didn't really work well for me. Now I use a combination. I actually put probably a lot of cursed magic items in my game. And I make a lot of custom magic items, and I include a lot of the stuff that's already in a pre-made adventure if I'm using that, okay? Right, so let me just grab my phone, and I'm going to just shuffle through and have a look at this, since it's now available on D&D Beyond. Let's have a look at this Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, very briefly. Unless, of course, you have questions. I didn't go far. I just didn't have my phone in front of me. Let's fire that up. Get my legs into place. And I have my rule book here. If people do have questions, feel free to go for it. But I will going to shuffle over it and see if I can't find this screen here. And then I've just got to find the right, where's the window sharing thing? I know I've got to set up somewhere. Window sharing? Come on, people. Make it happen. Is it gonna work? I don't know. Is it gonna work? I still don't see it. It's just not there. There's my window. I just need it to update. Is it not working? Is it broken? Do I need to go back into properties? Chroming it. Oh, there it is. Is that the right size though? I think that might be the wrong. No, that seems to be right. And my face is not in the way. So we should be able to transition over to this thing. Okay. All right, there we go. We got it. So this is this adventure thing that's come out. That's what is it? Yesterday? Yesterday for me? Was it yesterday for me? Or a couple of days ago? It's not. Yeah, it's new, right? It's the new starter adventure box set thingy that they've put out. That they now. I'm not saying this is a review, people. For those of you who are thinking, Fred's doing a review on this. No, I'm not. I'm curious because I haven't actually had a good look at it. And I thought it would be nice to be able to have a quick look at it just for the sake of I haven't seen it yet, and maybe none of you have yet either. So yeah. Yeah, so Troy Williams, exactly. It's your game, and if the players are up for it, then you do it. You know, that's sort of where my head's at with a lot of this stuff. Let's go over, and I'm sorry if I'm just trying to make sure my phone is updating. I love having consequences for magic items. I love the trade-off. Yeah, well, this is why I make a lot of cursed magic items. The whole thing, everything. Yeah, it costs, yes. Yep. Cursed magic items make really interesting stories. Okay, so let's have a look at this thing. And I do have my chat up, so if you have different questions, I will follow and answer them as I go. But let's have a look at this thing. Overview. Running the adventure sites. Magic items, monsters. I'm not really sort of going to focus on that. They've talked very briefly about getting started. They have so you've got a cleric, paladin, fighter, rogue, wizard. So they added in a paladin. Before they just had a wizard, rogue, fighter, and a cleric. Well, that's nice. Okay, giving you something else. Paladins are usually a pretty powerful class. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm looking just for very specific things. They talk about the number of players. 1 to 5 players. So if they're saying this can be played with 1 to 5 players, have they got advice on how to adjust the encounters? If there are combat encounters, that's the only thing we need to really worry about. Everything else should be able to be done by a single player. It's when you're dealing with fighting that can be a problem. So what sort of advice do they give? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's keep going. I'm not going to look at the adventure bit here. So we've got Dragon Rest, we've got Sea Grove Caves, we've got the Cursed Shipwreck, and we've got the Clifftop Observatory. Okay, so that's 4 locations. Dragon Rest looks like it's the hub for it's like where you get your information and where you would take a long rest. Magical Hot Springs, and the other 3 locations are where the adventure takes place. All right. So this is our map. There's not much going on here. This is very, very small. Just 4 locations on the whole thing. It's a hex grid, which is fine. That's kind of what we had before. You got a player version there we can look at as well, not just the Dungeon Master version. That's nice, cool. What else have we got here? Dungeon Masters, Storyteller, Referee, Role Player. Okay, all right, so they talk a little bit about that. We don't need to go into too much detail. Modifying the adventure. Okay, so to change and suit your tastes. Creature stat blocks, hit points, ability scores, treasure, making mistakes. Oh, they've got a section on making mistakes. Okay, all right. So where's the rest of it? Sharing. Oh, next chapter. Maybe that's what I'm going. Making mistakes, improvising ability checks. We were just talking about improvising ability checks today. Actually, as part of this course, is like, when you're unsure, just make an ability check and use a difficulty class or DC. Right, just determining what it is for you. So yeah, cool. All right, let's go on to the next bit. What do we got here? Dragon Rest. Like the picture. This does feel very sort of teenage, younger player, but not that young. Do you know what I mean? And that looks like Presto from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Is that Hank? Or is that not Hank? I'm not too sure. Who's this? I don't know. So we've got a little bit here. Read the following. That's 3 paragraphs to deal with. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes people want to roll dice way more than they need to. And that's fine, but it doesn't necessarily work. The drowned sailors, they're going to get a few zombies. 3 zombies at level 1. Well, zombies are pretty boring as a monster. I don't really think that they make a particularly good first encounter. They've got what? Initiative. So they're giving you a breakdown of what you do. They talk about how undead fortitude works. They're actually saying that the Sacred Flame cantrip is, yeah, and it is, Sacred Flame is the tool to use. Okay. Runa's Aid. So you've got somebody who can rescue you if you balls things up. Okay. All right. So obviously it seems that 3 zombies is not as terrifying as 4 goblins hiding in the bushes. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. They've put in a monster check. That's a DC 10 intelligence check, which is an easy check. I wouldn't even make them roll for a DC 10. I'd just give them the information. What do we know about zombies? But that's all you need to know. Just tell them. Just tell them once they ask. Meeting the inhabitants. Okay, so there's a few NPCs here. This Eldaruna looks like a leader. It's an adult bronze dragon in disguise. Of course it is. Some kobolds. Oh, have we got a whole bunch of kobolds here? Look at all these kobolds, people. These are NPCs. I can tell it right now, and there's hardly anything here. This is just asking for somebody to flesh them out. Make zombies apologize and cry when they start fighting and say they don't want to do this. Stole from the book. Yeah, why not? Okay. So there are a bunch of kobolds with hardly any information on them. So I feel like Agar, Bleep, Frub, Kilnick, Laylee, Meepo. Isn't Meepo... I'm sure Meepo is from a video game or something like that. That sounds very familiar. So you have a whole bunch of kobolds you can hang out with. Rix, Zark, Tarek. Okay, all right. You've got a human, Tarek. Okay. You've got another one. That's 1, 2. There's at least 3 major NPCs, a whole bunch of kobolds, and this is the Dragon Rest. How many locations have we got? 1, 2, 5. So it's very, very simple. It's like following the train. And then get off the train and there's a spot. Like there's not much going on here. So there's not a lot of choice. The path, the statues, winch house. The kitchen doesn't have very much going on there. The library doesn't have much going on there. You've got a Temple of Bahamut. Okay, all right. All right, okay. Pathway down. Cloister quests. Right, so this looks like it might be... This looks like it's a selection of random or side quests. These are probably side quests by the look. I think that's what this is all about here. Do you have enough to deal with it? More zombies, really? The sea caves, healing potions, myconids. All right, shipwreck. Well, nice to have a shipwreck, since individual quests. So you have individual quests: 1 for the cleric, 1 for the fighter, 1 for the paladin, 1 for the rogue, 1 for the wizard. Now they included something like this in The Lost Mine of Phandelver, some of which were really good and helped to a certain degree, and some that weren't very good. I would have to have a much closer look at these to determine whether these are going to work well in this adventure. I would probably have to read through each one individually. I'm not going to do that because I won't have time. Scarlet Citadel has a Meepo. Okay. Sunless. Yeah, Sunless Citadel. Yeah, Meepo. I think Meepo is also taken from I know it popped up in a video game, probably as a result of the Sunless Citadel, frankly, I would imagine. Because video games tend to do that. Video game creators play Dungeons and Dragons, and so when they're making these things, they actually port stuff over from the game. And yeah. All right, Lost Wormling. So we're dealing with a Lost Wormling. We're saving the day. Exploring the island. Additional encounters. Okay, so this is side quests here. Hot Spring Havoc. So some Fume Drakes. Spring Waters Treasure. There. Owlbear. So you got an owlbear involved. Of course, we've got to have an owlbear involved. Animal handling. Really? A 10. An animal handling. Like that's an easy task. Like everybody's going to have an owlbear. It's supposed to be hostile, right? I wonder what else they've got here in terms of how it's going to work. Indifferent towards... Okay. All right. Kobold Renegades. Really? Okay. Sure. Why not? Okay, so there's some level adjustment stuff involved here and that one there. The others, I'm assuming they've decided they don't need to adjust those. Okay, so but there's some level adjustment for the Kobold Renegades. What lies beneath? Adventure background. I'm not too sure what that's all about. Okay, so let's move on. I want to see the next bit. Look, I'm sorry if this is not what you were signing on for. That's Diana from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I mean, that is Hank, the ranger from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. So we're putting in the artwork, but we're not including these characters as NPCs in the game, by the looks, as far as I can tell. And they're not the playable characters in your game either. So you can't play as them, and you can't interact with them. You just get to be teased with their artwork. That's a shitty thing to do. Okay, Octopus Caves overview. The Sea Grove Cave features. There must be a map here for this thing, surely. Running the chapter by boat along the coast. Approaching... Okay, entering the caves. There's a lot of advice here on various different things. Distress spores. There's a lot of spores. Okay. Sea Grove Cave. How many locations? So we've got 5 or 6 locations, so it's reasonably simple. It's a little bit shorter and smaller than some of the other maps that we got in Lost Mine of Phandelver. Yes, Jean, sorry, you are a bit on the late side, but there's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. Exactly what I'm signed up for. Yeah, so I'm just looking through. I've already gone through the basic rules for Dungeons and Dragons. You're welcome to ask questions. I'm just looking through the new starter adventure, just to see what we have here. Two different routes you could take potentially, and so there's a couple of choices. Not a lot, but there's a couple of choices. Fungus farm. So we've got is this myconids? Yes, it is myconids. Blighted fungi, larder. There's some fun. There's some fun artwork. Very kiddie-ish, kind of appealing. I guess that kind of appeals to our current audience. Not everybody, though. Ending the chapter. Okay, what else have we got here? I'm going to have a look closer at this sort of thing. I don't know when I'm going to do this. I feel like it's going to have to be in the off-season, and it's going to take me a while to go over it too. I'm really tempted. I would like to run the adventure myself before I make a proper assessment, but I don't think my players are going to say, oh, can we go and play Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, or would you prefer to just continue with your pirate campaign? I think the pirate campaign is going to win over them. Frankly, I think that's more likely. Who is this? That is Eric the Cavalier. Who's that? That's his new girlfriend. I don't know who she is. Who knows who she is? I don't recognise that character. Other shipwrecks? Okay, so we get a shipwreck as well. Well, that's good. So, Dragon of Stormwreck Isle means we get a shipwreck, we get a cave, we get a sort of a fortified stone location. And how many locations is there? There's 9 locations as part of this this wreck. Okay, all right. Crow's Nest, harpies involved, more zombies. Oh god, More zombies. More zombies. Shit. Right now, I really want to make changes. Um, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry. It's the mess hall. Like, there's nothing there. Okay. Got to have some empty locations, right? Some adjustment for player characters. Okay. All right. That doesn't seem to come up that often. It's not always there. I noticed. The hold. Elven boots. Okay. Right. Detect magic. Ending the chapter. Harpies. Returning. More harpies. Level adjustment stuff. Ending the chapter. Okay. Gaining levels. Is there any advice around like doing this by milestones? Advance to level 2. Okay, so if you complete this section, the wreck, the shipwreck, then you advance to level 2 from level 1. Okay, that would be important. It gives you some additional advice if you do it out of order. Okay, all right. That's Diana, Presto, and Eric, the Cavalier again. Not a super fan. Not a fan of that particular artwork piece. not that great. We get a blue dragon wormling. So Lost Mod of Phandelver had a young green dragon called Venom Fang, and then Dragon of Ice by Peak had a Cryvane who was a young white dragon, and in this case we were only going as far as level 3, I'm assuming, which means we get a blue dragon wormling. Is that actually going to scratch that itch? If you play Dungeons and Dragons, will that scratch the itch? And there's a bronze dragon wormling named... Okay, all right. So there's some wormlings involved and a dragon in disguise. Boats approaching the water. Okay, so what do we got here? So this has got to be the climax, right? Because it looks like this is the end of the adventure. How many locations? So we've got 5 locations. They're all very, very simple and basic. There's something going on here with the dotted lines. I don't know what exactly that is. Winged kobolds and sturges. Sturges and kobolds. Winged kobolds. All right. More of them. Okay. Clever solutions. So they're obviously suggesting that you can solve problems a different way here. And I don't see anything that sort of stands out as... Okay, so they are mentioning... there is actually mention of more than one thing you could do. So, waking the dragon. If awaked, Spark Render is hostile toward the characters, growling and barking threats in Draconic. Okay, characters can speak Draconic, the Paladin and the Wizard, so they already know which of the pre-made characters can speak Draconic, and they're pointing it out. This is a good thing. Can try to convince the dragon not to attack by making a DC 12 charisma check. Well, at least it's not a 10. Apply deception, intimidation, or persuasion skill as appropriate. Okay, all right. So this is not actually designed to be very difficult to deal with. It looks like it's not even designed to necessarily be a battle. Okay. And some scripted responses. Hidden locations. Okay. I feel like there might be a little bit more guidance with how to do things. Treasure. Spark Render. Ritual. Okay. Spirit. Is it dragon spirits? Ending of the adventure. I think that's... Is that it? I think that might be it. Come on. Didn't do anything. I press a button. Try again. Magic items. How many magic items? We've got 1, 2, okay, 3, 4, 4, okay, 5, 6. So I don't really think there's a lot of support around magic items, but you are only going from level 1 to 3, so that's probably fine, actually. Creatures. All right. So they got their stat blocks for your creatures in here, which was not really a big deal because, but it gives us an idea of what they've got. So you've got your blue dragon wormling, you've got your bronze dragon wormling, you've got your adult bronze dragon, fire snake. Okay, we've got a fume drake, we've got a ghoul. So there's not just zombies. Harpy, kobold tinkerer, kobold winged, Myconids, sprouts. Not really. Fighting mushroom people's not really that interesting, I've found. So hopefully it's not a fight. This is an NP. This is a plant person. The owlbear is here. We've got an octopus that's spore-like. Sturges. What is that? That's just a humanoid. It's just a character. Hang on. Before coming to, so there's not even a picture of Tarak. There's not even a picture, really, or this. There's no picture of this character either. Nothing. Violent fungus. So we've got some fungus. We've got zombies, and that's it. So it looks like they've included a picture of all the monsters apart from three. Is it 3 NPCs? I think it might be 3. 3 NPCs. Well, that's sort of a bit of a sucky thing to do. I would have, yeah. All right, okay. Well, at least I know. I've seen it. I'll talk more about it in the future, I'm assuming, because I'm sure there is something to say about it. But yeah, nothing sort of stands out for me that I need to say about it. It's just, I guess, a different way of doing things. Rather than, I don't know what it's going to be like. I kind of get the feeling that it would probably be much easier to run as a dungeon master, maybe not as exciting for a player to play through. But who knows how that all works out. Yeah, so I don't know that was useful to you people, but look, I just wanted to have a quick look since it did show up on D&D Beyond, and I thought I'd have a quick peruse, but I'll run that down some other time. As I said, tomorrow is Unearthed Arcana, Expert Classes, Rogue, Bard, Ranger. Have a talk about that. I will be analysing it. There will be some discussion about what I think those classes need to be able to do, and whether they've missed the point. Which means they probably have missed the point because they usually do. And I think they may have annoyed a few people too. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow. And yeah, it's going to be long. It's quite a lot of information, people. So I apologise if it's going to take me a while. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been supporting me on Patreon. I want to thank everybody who's been watching my live streams and watching the replays of my live streams, and watching my edited videos. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.